Have you noticed how the media is now pretending like that Maryland man story is gone? Chris Van Hollen, oh, move on, other things to talk about. Pete Hegseth, well, we're not going to follow their lead. No, this Maryland man story is getting way worse for the Democrats in the media and horrible for Chris Van Hollen. And we're going to show you all of his disaster appearances from yesterday coming up in a second. And yes, we'll dive into the Pete Hegseth non-scandal, non-story and how President Trump and this White House unequivocally stood by him in the most completely unambiguous way earlier this morning. We'll show that to you. And absolute disarray over with the Democrats. David Hogg is blowing the place up, and we're popping the popcorn. All that and a whole lot more coming up right now in a special Easter Monday edition. My name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry. Oh, and I would love to also just take a quick moment, if we could, because obviously there's a dominant story in the news that I want to comment on, and that is the passing of Pope Francis, the Vicar of Christ, the head of the Catholic Church. And this is a man who many people have strong reactions about, most of whom, if you've noticed, aren't Catholic. Well, if you think the media is bad when they comment on politics and they show their bias and they show how lazy they are and they just repeat what everybody else says, it gets even worse when they try to talk about something that they really don't know much about. The Christian faith and specifically Catholicism. You know, well, he almost changed the church's dogma about women priesthood and gay marriage. No, he didn't. He didn't even come close. As soon as somebody in the media tells you that Pope Francis almost changed the church's dogma on ... stop watching, stop listening, because no pope can change the church's dogma on anything. That's the whole point of having a dogma of the Catholic Church. I'd like to say something about Pope Francis, and I wrote it down. And, you know, famously, I go without a script here because it's just how we fly. But I don't want to mess this up. So if you'll indulge me. Pope Francis passed away yesterday at the age of 88, or really early this morning, and he left a complex legacy for devout Catholics like myself. As the 266th pontiff, his 12-year papacy was marked by humility and a heart for the marginalized, yet his progressive leanings often stirred unease among the conservative faithful. From his election in 2013, Francis captivated the world with his simplicity, skewing opulent trappings for a modest lifestyle. His choice of a name honored St. Francis of Assisi, actually kind of shocking that he was St. Francis the First, that no pope before him honored St. Francis of Assisi in such a way. He reflected St. Francis's call for a poor church for the poor. His encyclical Laudato Si championed environmental stewardship, aligning with Catholic social teaching, and his outreach to refugees and prisoners embodied Christ's love. These acts resonated deeply, reminding us of the gospel's radical demands. In fact, the whole idea of social and economic justice was not at odds with traditional Catholic teaching. In fact, they've always been traditional Catholic teaching, not Marxism. The sad thing is that the secular world has taken traditional Catholic social and economic justice teaching that go back millennia, and they've warped it into Marxism. Don't confuse the two. But sadly, because of some of the things that Pope Francis emphasized, in the secular world, it made him sound like a secular liberal. Now, I'm a conservative Catholic. I wrestled with his approach, his ambiguity on doctrinal matters, particularly regarding marriage, sexuality, the liturgy. It left a lot of us yearning for clarity. His 2016 document, Amoris Laetitia, forgive my Latin, sparked debate over communion for the divorced and remarried. I am one of them. So I can speak personally about how challenging and frustrating it is to have ambiguity from the teaching office of the Catholic Church about something that is critically important. It seemed to soften the church's firm stance, but it didn't actually. The church stands exactly where it has always stood on all of those hot button issues that everyone is concerned about in the secular media. The difference is that Pope Francis approached those issues a little differently than his predecessors. That's all. But the church still stands exactly where it stood before, which is frankly all we want from a pope. His restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass pained many people like me who cherish its reverence. His openness to dialogue with secular ideology sometimes felt like a departure from the uncompromising truth that we hold sacred. But here's the truth about Pope Francis. He had some tough acts to follow. The Catholic Church has profoundly blessed to witness the reigns of two extraordinary giants, St. Pope John Paul the Great and Pope Benedict XVI, whose theological depth, moral clarity, global influence, sheer personal magnetism set a towering standard for the papacy. Their back-to-back tenures was a rare gift. Doesn't happen very often. It shaped the faith through a time of immense change around the world with unwavering commitment to tradition and doctrine. In contrast, Pope Francis, while a humble servant of God, often seemed more of a standard pontiff. His focus on social issues and progressive leanings paling in comparison to the intellectual and spiritual brilliance of his two predecessors. For many, his papacy felt like a step back from the greatness of those two remarkable men, leaving a sense that his legacy, though marked by compassion, lacked the same transformative power. And that's not fair to him. He was a good pope, and he got the job done, and he was inspirational to millions, hundreds of millions worldwide. Despite disagreements, you cannot deny this man's sincerity. Francis sought to bridge divides in a fractured world. Even if his methods unsettled traditionalists, his death marks the end of a papacy that challenged us to balance charity with fidelity. And as we mourn, we pray for his soul and for the church's future, trusting that the Holy Spirit will guide the next successor of Peter. May Pope Francis rest in the eternal embrace of the God he served, and may we remain steadfast in faith. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to do that. Now let's move on to the news of the day. Maryland man, Maryland man, Maryland man. We've got new Maryland men. 2 Maryland men. See if this sounds familiar. They've been arrested over the murder of a 23-year-old mother whose body was found on April 17th, buried outside the Cedarville State Forest in Prince George's County. That's the same county where Kilmar Abrego Garcia lived, you know, the other great Maryland man. This reporting from Andy No tells it all. Illegal immigrant Casey Robinson Alexi Barrera Rosa. How come they all have so many names? 24 years old, was arrested outside of the state and will be transported back to Maryland to face charges. Rolvin Eduardo Barrera, there's got to be a story there, 37 years old of unknown immigration status, was charged with being an accessory to the murder. This is the latest murder of a woman in Maryland involving suspects who are illegal foreign nationals. That's Casey Robinson, Alexi Barrera. And excuse me. That's Barrera Rosa. I apologize, sir. Rolvin Eduardo Barrera. They look like great Maryland men, don't they? Loving fathers. I bet one of their children is autistic. That's the woman that they brutally murdered. This is what it's like living in Maryland right now. The unhidden story or untold story about Prince George's County in particular is that it is a hotbed for MS-13 violence and gangs. That's why the Prince George's County Police Department has a gang unit that is so well-versed in identifying gang members, specifically MS-13 gang members. Chris Van Hollen, though, and the Democrats, they don't care about that. They only care about, I guess, scoring political points against Donald Trump because they think that they're fighting, and so that's all that matters. Where we Americans, we look at it and say, okay, you're fighting, but who are you fighting for? And it certainly doesn't seem like they're fighting for the victims of these heinous crimes. 4 more Democrats are now heading to El Salvador, and we say, go for it. Terrific. Why should Chris Van Hollen be the only one to end his political future? They're going to go fight for the release of Abrego Garcia. It's Representative Maxine Dexter of Oregon, Representative Robert Garcia of California, Representative Yasaman Ansari of Arizona, and Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost of Florida. There's the 4 of them, and they're all going to be traveling together. James Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, has declared that no congressional funds will go to pay for these trips. So I guess they're getting funded by their own personal campaigns or from maybe an outside group, maybe La Raza or one of those open borders crowds. I say to Chairman Comer, as much as I appreciate him trying to protect taxpayer dollars, back off, bud. Let him go. In fact, Republicans in charge of the House right now, they should be financing these trips. It'll ensure a larger majority come the next election day. Chris Van Hollen, who did confirm over the weekend that he used taxpayer dollars for his trip, that was just one of the small headlines out of this entire escapade. He did the full Ginsburg, although technically it wasn't really the full Ginsburg because he just sat in a studio and they changed the backdrop behind him. It was Mr. Ginsburg, the lawyer for Monica Lewinsky, who actually went from studio to studio in Washington, D.C. to appear on all the Sunday shows. That's what we call a full Ginsburg in D.C. because we're nerds. But he did appear on all the shows. Here he is with Dana Bash in a remarkable exchange while you hear Chris Van Hollen ruin his political career and maybe of Westmore, the governor of Maryland, and all the other Democrats who said, yeah, go, Chris, go, we're with you. I want you to pay close attention to the look on Dana Bash's face as she can't believe this guy is the moron that he pretends to be.
Now, President Trump says that some of Abrego Garcia's tattoos signify that he's a member of MS-13. In 2019, police alleged a confidential informant claimed that Abrego Garcia was an active MS-13 member. His wife and his attorney deny that, of course. Can you say with absolute certainty that he is not, nor has he ever been a member of the MS-13 gang? And did you ask him point blank?
Well, Dana, what Donald Trump is trying to do here is change the subject. The subject at hand is that he and his administration are defying a court order to give Abrego Garcia his due process rights. They are trying to litigate on social media what they should be doing in the courts. They need to put up or shut up in the courts. Let me tell you, and I decided to write this down so I could be absolutely accurate as to what Federal District Court Judge Zinnes said about these allegations by the Trump administration. Quote, no evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or any terrorist activity has been presented to the court. That's where to litigate this. Mm-hmm. It's been litigated in many other places. So yeah. I'm not going to get into the details because the whole purpose of our court system is for them to adjudicate these things, not for Donald Trump to go off on social media.
Yeah, you're right. They have not, there hasn't been a court hearing for them to put forward evidence in the first place, which is your whole point. But since you were the one person to have met with him, and since this is a thing, you say on social media, it's what we hear from Donald Trump and Republicans every day, all day long, you didn't ask him?
I didn't ask him that because I know what his answer is. What he told me was he was sad and traumatized that he was being in prison because he has committed no crimes. And that goes to the heart of this issue because he's being denied his due process rights. And Donald Trump is trying to change the subject. And, you know, when people start asking that question, in my view, they're falling into the president's trap because what the president wants to do is talk about that as if we can't all fight gang violence, which I've been doing for much longer than Donald Trump, right? His argument is you can't fight that and at the same time uphold people's constitutional rights. That's a very dangerous view. And if we deny the constitutional rights of this one man, it threatens the constitutional rights of everybody in America.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, like I said, he's a moron and he's ruining his political career. Every time he says Donald Trump's trying to change the subject, all he wants to do is talk about violent illegal immigrant gangs. Someone needs to remind Chris Van Hollen that that is the freaking subject. That's the whole point. It's Chris Van Hollen who spent the last 2 weeks saying this is a kind and loving Maryland man. He's just a good father, and I'm just going to go take care of my fellow American, my constituent. He's my dude. And so at some point, I think it's fair to say, okay, he's your guy, but is he a member of the gang or not? Because then the follow-up question is, do you agree with President Trump that MS-13 is a terrorist organization? Love to hear his position on that. Nobody asked. Also, as Chris Van Hollen says that he doesn't want to talk about those things because that's changing the subject, I understand him trying to avoid it because, you see, this is the subject. That would be the Maryland woman who got brutally murdered. This is the subject. One of the suspects in that murder. Here's the other one. In Prince George's County, Maryland, members of MS-13. When Chris Van Hollen grandstands and tries to play the tough guy and say, I've been fighting MS-13 gangs longer than Donald Trump has, the answer is, how's that working out, Chris? You may be fighting, but you're not winning. You're losing the fight. Anybody can fight, but if they constantly lose, what's the point? If you've been fighting MS-13 in your state of Maryland so long, how come women keep getting raped and murdered? Of course, nobody asked that question either. Boy, why, is this why they don't give me a Sunday show? So here he is on Fox News Sunday. Shannon Bream actually got some good questions in. She's the only one that actually asked pertinent questions, other than Dana asking the basic, did you ask him if he was MS-13? But there could be some follow-ups there. Like, did you not ask him because you don't want to know? Did you not ask him because that complicates your messaging? Does it matter to you if he is a member of MS-13? If he's a member of MS-13, do you agree that it's a gang? And do you agree that President Trump should do something about it since no one else is? How many arrests have happened of MS-13 gang members in Prince George's County, and how many of them have been handed over to ICE? How about in the entire state of Maryland? Why doesn't Montgomery County, your county in Maryland, why don't they cooperate with ICE? Why do they let people back out on the streets instead of handing them over to federal authorities? These are all great follow-up questions, Dana. You were so close. How's that journalism degree working out? Here's Shannon Bream.
Did you ask him if he has any association with MS-13?
I did not ask him directly because he's answered that question repeatedly, as his lawyers have. My purpose in going there was to, number one, see if he was alive, see if he was healthy, take his story. As I said, they have litigated this.
Okay, so he was just there to check his pulse, and there he is reaching over and trying to hold his hand and check his pulse, I suppose. It doesn't matter to me if he's a gang member or not. That's not the point. That's not why I was there. Really? Okay, does it matter to you that your constituents, U.S. citizens, taxpayers are being murdered by members of that gang? Doesn't that sort of up the ante, Chris Van Hollen?
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip.
Who did?
I do like that. Who paid for the trip? Well, this was official. That's not the question. Who paid for the trip? Well, Shannon, you paid for this trip. And then turned to the camera. And so did all of you. What about Rachel Morin?
Neglected.
I don't think that's not the question. I think it's about the mother being unable to understand why you would spend so much time and energy for this person who was not in your state or in the country legally, at which time she felt like you didn't have the same concern about her daughter and her family.
I did have concern. I have concern. My heart goes out to every Maryland family that is the victim of violence, regardless of the perpetrator.
So it's interesting. And again, I like Shannon Bream. I think she does a good job. But the question is not whether he had any concern for the victims of gang murders in his state, because, see, he can lie about that. He can lie about what his feels are, what he holds in his heart. No, the problem isn't whether you had any concern over the family of Rachel Morin. The question is whether you showed any concern over that family, which you have not. You still do not. Sorry, going on a Sunday show and awkwardly answering a question about it, the one question he was asked about it, isn't the same thing as actually doing something. I have all the feels. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Well, you see, he has concerns over Rachel Morin's family, he claims. He has concerns over Abrego Garcia, he claims. But only one person actually got action from Senator Van Hollen. He only traveled to go express concern and show his feelings for one of those people. And I think that matters. Yeah, Chris Van Hollen's done, and he's probably dragging Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, down with him. They both want to run for president, it appears. Otherwise, why else would Chris Van Hollen do this? The sad thing is Chris Van Hollen's behavior here may help him with the base of the Democrat Party. They may love the fact that he fights. The rest of America is saying, okay, I don't care if he fights. Who's he fighting for? And then when you find out, yeah, not so popular. Sadly, with the Democrats these days, the fact that he's fighting for an illegal immigrant gang member may help him out with the base, but it certainly doesn't help him in a general election. And since Governor Wes Moore is sort of stuck rooting him on too, this may hurt Wes Moore too. Watch Wes Moore to distance himself from this. But ultimately, whether it's Democrats going down to El Salvador and trying to jump on the Chris Van Hollen bandwagon so they can go down with the ship too or not, that's obviously a big part of this story. But I still find the most important driving part of this story, the media's behavior. Not only the media's behavior, asking the same rubber-stamped, stupid template questions of Chris Van Hollen instead of actually challenging him on this issue, and maybe asking this, because you keep saying it's due process, sir. Can you describe what the due process is here? Because last I checked, Barack Obama sent a drone attack to kill an American citizen who he deemed to be a member of a terrorist organization. That's right. During Obama's presidency, an American citizen joined ISIS, and Obama sent a drone to kill him. There was no due process there. Obama was the commander-in-chief. He was protecting our national security, and he killed it. I may not have liked it. You may not have liked it, but there's no doubt that he has that power to do so as commander-in-chief and to be the sole exclusive man in charge of our national security. This president has now deemed MS-13 and TDA to be terrorist organizations, just like ISIS. So you tell me what's worse. Gathering these people up, putting them in front of an immigration judge giving them a deportation order, and then sending these people to a prison in El Salvador because their own country won't take them. Is that worse? Or is Obama actually flattening a dude in the desert with a drone without due process? And that guy ain't an illegal alien. That guy was an American citizen. But I didn't hear anybody on any of these shows challenging Chris Van Hollen on that. How can you support Obama doing that to an American citizen, but you don't support Donald Trump merely deporting an illegal immigrant who didn't give a crap about due process when he entered our country illegally? But despite all of that, none of those journalists, teleprompter readers actually had the worst performance over the course of the last 3 days when it comes to this story. That dubious distinction goes to a football player, Michael Strahan. Michael Strahan was interviewing the wife of the MS-13 gang member. You know her. She's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars on GoFundMe, despite the fact that she put in multiple requests for restraining orders because she claimed that her loving, wonderful Maryland man, nowhere near an MS-13 violent gang member, was beating the crap out of her. And she swore that in affidavits to the police. But now she's saying he's a wonderful man. Somebody's lying here. So here's Michael Strahan. Good Morning America. ABC News decides to have the football player conduct the interview. And here's the one question he asked about that critical issue with regard to her credibility on this.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and you know I'm not going to push on that apparently, but how much hope? I have to ask it. Can we
go through this together, please?
I have to ask
we need to go through this together.
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband.
Why isn't that pausing for me? There we go. Let's go through this together so we can see just how atrocious this lamentable display of journalism was, shall we? First, watch how he sets up the question.
I have to ask it.
I have to ask it. Have you ever noticed whenever a reporter or a journalist asks a question that they're not happy they are going to ask, like they're apologizing before they even pose the question? Gee, I'm sorry. I have to ask this only because people will make fun of me if I don't. It's actually a verbal cue to the person that you're interviewing that they don't really have to answer it. Oh, really? You're giving me a get out of jail free card here. You're backing into the question. You're apologizing to me before you even ask it. I don't want you to be mad at me, but I have to ask this question. Okay, so I have to ask it. And then what's the question?
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
That's not the question. That's not the question. Clearly, you were in fear of your husband. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. But now you're saying that he's a loving, gentle father. So did you lie to the police, or are you lying to us right now? That's how you ask the question. Or maybe how many times did he beat you up before you eventually called the police? Because the track record for abused wives, sadly, is that they take it for many years before they finally call the police on their husband. See, if you really wanted to get to the truth, if you wanted to marginalize the person that you're interviewing to test and push their credibility, that's how you would ask this. Michael Strahan either has no interest in doing this or he doesn't have the skills. But here's the thing. I think he has the skills because he's actually tougher when he's interviewing NFL players on Fox NFL Sunday. And somehow ABC News decided, yeah, let's have Strahan do this one. So then he asks the question, were you in fear for your life? And she freaking freezes, right? He just asked the question. And now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Husband is alive.
7 seconds. 7 seconds trying to remember what her answer needs to be. And what's the answer?
That's all I can say.
My husband's alive. That's all I can say. That's a hell of an answer, isn't it? So is this like, speaking of ISIS, is this like an ISIS hostage video? Are there members of MS-13 just off camera with machetes waiting to take care of business if she answers wrong? Do you fear for your life right now, ma'am? Blink twice if you need help. You put in a police report against your husband a couple of years ago. Were you in fear for your life? And her answer is, well, he's alive. That's all I can say. And that the pièce de résistance, the chef's kiss, the journalism award, I'm waiting for Michael Strahan to get his Pulitzer on this one, is what he says after that.
Okay. And I'm not going to push on that, apparently. But
well, okay, I'm not going to push you on that. Why would I push you on that? That's what a reporter would do, or a journalist, or somebody who gets paid millions of dollars on a network morning show. That's the kind of thing they would do, but not me. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's exactly what I get. I get millions of dollars to interview you on a morning show. Not going to push you on that. I'm not going to push you on that, he said. Why did he put it that way? I'll tell you why he put it that way. Because this was prearranged with her attorneys. Okay, you get one question about that. But that's not why we're here. And if you ask more questions, you're violating our agreement. We'll give you the exclusive. Good Morning America gets the get. But you get one question, no follow-ups. That's why she gave a completely evasive, nonsensical answer. And his response was, well, I guess I'm not going to push you on that. Because she did know he wasn't going to push her on that. Because that was the prearrangement. This is how the networks function. You deserve a better media, I promise you. And that's why you're here. Hopefully, we do a better job than they do. Although I promise you, we don't make as much money. But I can come close to making that much if you read my book about the media. It's called Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. And you can get it in this beautiful paperback edition or the big boy hardcover. You can also get my audiobook where I narrate it. The media is changing. They've committed suicide. They've killed themselves based on what you just saw. And now we're here to write a book about it so you can see exactly how bad it was during the 2024 election and how things have changed for the good and forever. Get my book. You can buy it at Amazon. It's Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. Thank you. One sure sign that Chris Van Hollen's let's try that again. One sure sign that the Trump administration won the MS-13 gang member Maryland man argument in the news is that everyone wanted to forget it this morning. They saw that Chris Van Hollen was a disaster. They saw that they had lost the narrative. So suddenly, today's headlines are all about Pete Hegseth. Time to turn the page. Time to change the subject. Oh, we don't need to talk about that anymore because we lost. So let's just move on to the next fake outrage. Well, here's your New York Times headline. Hegseth said to have shared attack details in second signal chat Defense Secretary sent sensitive information about strikes in Yemen to an encrypted group chat. They included his wife and brother. People familiar with the matter said. Here's what's interesting about that. The people familiar with the matter. Did you see the headlines last week where a good handful of people got fired from the Pentagon because they were leaking information to the media? Put 2 and 2 together, dudes. These guys are angry that they got fired. They got fired for leaking to the media. And suddenly the New York Times has a big article with inside information. And then here's Politico. Former Pentagon official warns department's dysfunction could topple Hegseth. Now, this sounds like this Politico reporter snagged an interview with a former Pentagon official. But if you read the subheadline, this tells you everything you need to know about how the media operates and how Politico in particular works. The last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon. Jin Oyat, the former top Defense Department spokesperson, wrote in a Politico magazine opinion piece. Now think about this for a minute. That former top Defense Department spokesperson, in other words, he's not at the Defense Department anymore. He didn't get the gig that he wanted at the Pentagon. So now he's gone. He writes an opinion piece for Politico magazine. And now Politico newspaper writes an article about the opinion piece in their magazine as if it's news. But this news article is really just regurgitating the opinion piece from, yet again, a disgruntled former employee. It's amazing how this works, isn't it? I mean, as soon as you see it once, you can't unsee it. Sean Parnell, who is the spokesperson for the Pentagon, the job the guy from Politico wanted, put this statement out. Another day, another old story back from the dead. The Trump-hating media continues to be obsessed with destroying anyone committed to President Trump's agenda. This time, New York Times and all other fake news that repeat their garbage are enthusiastically taking the grievances of disgruntled former employees as the sole sources for their article. They relied only on the words of people who were fired this week and appear to have a motive to sabotage the Secretary of the President's agenda. There was no classified information in any signal chat, no matter how many ways they try to write the story. What is true is that the Office of the Secretary of Defense is continuing to become stronger and more efficient in executing President Trump's agenda. We've already achieved so much for the American warfighter, and we'll never back down. So that's Sean Parnell. He's the spokesperson for the Defense Department. Once again, look at the headline on the opinion piece in Politico magazine. Last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon. John Oyat, the former top Defense Department spokesperson, wrote. Now think about that for a minute. This guy used to be the top Defense Department spokesperson. Now that job belongs to this guy, Sean Parnell. Do you think maybe he has an axe to grind? Do you think maybe he's annoyed? Do you think maybe when you get fired from an organization or you don't get the promotion you were hoping to get from an organization, one of your sadly base instincts, but still rather understandable based on the human condition and narcissism and pride and egotistical impulses, is to sort of do the sour grapes thing? I want this job at the Pentagon. I want this job at the Pentagon. Somebody else got the job at the Pentagon. The Pentagon sucks. I don't know this guy, but it is telling that his opinion piece got published in Politico, isn't it? So what to make of this? Well, first of all, I can tell you that every single one of the journalists writing this story, they have the Signal app on their phone, and they use it to talk to their anonymous sources in the government. I promise you that. I can also tell you that government officials in sensitive jobs in the Defense Department and in the intelligence community, the FBI and the Justice Department get their government-issued devices with Signal already preloaded, and they're advised to use Signal. That's just the truth. It's the fact. I know it firsthand because I know people who work in the government, and they've showed me. I communicate with them myself on Signal. And everybody knows that in Washington, D.C. This is a non-scandal. Are there people at the Pentagon who don't like Pete Hegseth? Absolutely. Are there people who are big MAGA guys who love Trump and don't like Pete Hegseth? Absolutely. Some of them because they're jealous of Pete Hegseth. Some of them because they don't think Pete Hegseth is doing a good job. Some of them because Pete Hegseth is doing a little too good a job. It's Washington, D.C. Resentment comes from all corners. But the fact that this was the dominant story, other than the death of the Pope this morning, tells you that they've lost all the other narratives they had going into the weekend. Everything crashed and burned, so it was time to bring up a new one. So the question is it chaos over at the Pentagon? Well, yes, there may be some chaos at the Pentagon right now. That's what happens when you bring in a brand new team that's supposed to stop the direction this giant organization was going and turn it in a new direction. All the people who lost their jobs because they worked for the DEI department over at the Pentagon, yeah, it's probably pretty chaotic over there for them. All the people who were ignoring the war fighters and were more interested in politics and funding and money and machinations and intrigue and playing the Washington, D.C. game, instead of putting our soldiers and our sailors and our airmen and our Marines first and foremost in their minds, yeah, for them, it's very chaotic right now. That's what we voted for. Listen, under Lloyd Austin, it wasn't chaotic at all, right? I mean, just look at how neat and orderly the Afghanistan pullout was. It wasn't chaotic under Lloyd Austin at all. Just ask the thousands of people who were dishonorably discharged because they wouldn't put an experimental shot in their arm. But at least it wasn't chaotic. It wasn't chaotic at all under Lloyd Austin when he went MIA for a week without reporting up to the commander-in-chief or down to his deputy secretary. But you didn't have any headlines in the New York Times about the chaos over at the Pentagon during those halcyon days of Lloyd Austin's terror reign of terror. The fact of the matter is, it appears Pete Hegseth is doing exactly the job that Donald Trump wanted. And by the way, part of the proof in the pudding is that there's Pete Hegseth front and center this morning at the Easter egg roll. And when asked about all of these stories, well, when I just said that he's doing exactly the job Donald Trump wants him to do, part of that job is to do this.
What do you want to say, sir, about the signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't get back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. And on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much. Have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
All right. And just to confirm that, in fact, he has gotten a vote of confidence from the president, through his spokesperson, gave a vote of confidence that was unambiguously supportive. Trust me, if you've watched Washington, D.C. enough, especially the Trump presidency the first time around, you very rarely heard this kind of endorsement, especially for a politician that potentially could be under fire from the media. Watch this.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring. So they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job and the president stands strongly behind him.
That is beyond unambiguous. That is 100% in his camp. Now, things could change. They always can in Washington, D.C., and certainly in a Trump presidency, they can change quickly depending on what's going on. But as of now, Pete Hegseth has the full support of the president. And let me just say this, because listen, a lot of people have stuff to say about Pete Hegseth. And no, he's not your typical Secretary of Defense. We've seen the typical Secretary of Defense over the course of the last several years. The knives are out for him because there's a lot of money being made in Washington, D.C. through the Defense Department right now. And he kind of threatens that. Pete Hegseth, if I can put it in terms of sports, for those of you who appreciate sports, Pete Hegseth is a player's coach. All right. The players love him. And if you're into college sports, Pete Hegseth is out there meeting the star players in their living room with their mom and assuring them that if they come and play on this team, they're going to win a natty. And he's recruiting them. He's recruiting them and breaking records recruiting star players. The war fighters love this head coach. Now, that also means, if you understand sports, that sometimes the players coach doesn't always play well with the other people on the coaching staff or coaches of rival teams. Doesn't always play well with the executives as well. But the players love him. And oftentimes, when the players love the coach, well, they'll go to the wall for him. They'll do whatever it takes. They're going to leave everything out on the field to win the game. And in this case, the game is winning a battle and a war on behalf of the United States of America. I know we're not used to this kind of Secretary of Defense, but maybe it's time we tried it out because that other thing ain't working anymore. And at this point, with real dangers all around the world, maybe we need a player's coach. Maybe the players deserve to have a player's coach. So when push comes to shove, and they're literally taking bullets, they know that the top guy has their back. Hey, give us a like on the show if you don't mind. And if you do like our show, that means you like Town Hall Media. Town Hall Media is the parent company that presents and produces this show. And we also run townhall.com, hotair.com, PJ Media, Twitchy, Red State, and Bearing Arms. Those are all of our websites, and we got a ton more content on all of those sites, including Town Hall TV with exclusive video documentaries. In fact, we're producing a documentary right now that we're very excited about. Can't wait to tell you about that, too. The best thing for you to do to get all of that stuff commercial-free and exclusive content from Town Hall is to go to get your VIP membership at townhallvip.com. You go to townhallvip.com, get your VIP membership, use my name at checkout, you get 50% off. And you're going to get all our content. You're going to get all ad-free. You're going to get exclusive content, and you're going to keep us afloat. You're going to keep us free of having to worry about advertising boycotts and big tech sort of shadow banning us from the kind of revenue that most websites can get with the traffic that we've got because we're conservatives and they hate us. But you love us. You just gave us a thumbs up. So go to townhallvip.com, get your membership, and get 50% off. Get that today. There is disarray over at the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. There, I think, I could be wrong, but my sources tell me they're considering San Salvador as the location for the Democratic National Convention in 2028. I think it would be fantastic. I don't think Abrego Garcia is eligible to run for president, but if he could, you know he'd have most of the votes. But right now, the DNC is contemplating bigger issues that are a little bit more close at home. You see, for some stupid reason, they elected this guy as their vice chair. David Hogg. They elected an internet troll, a Twitter troll who wants to remove the Second Amendment from the Constitution and whose main claim to fame is to get a bunch of attention because his classmates died in a tragic school shooting. And he decided that it was Republicans' fault. That's David Hogg, and he's the vice chair of the DNC now. And also, if you salute like that, aren't you a Nazi? I could be wrong. All right, so this week, or early last week, David Hogg started a political action committee. Now, again, he's the vice chair of the Democrat National Committee. What's the job of the Democratic National Committee? The job of the Democratic National Committee is to raise money and organize to elect Democrats. David Hogg, early last week, set up a political action committee specifically designed to primary Democrats. These are Democrats that are currently in elected office. They are congressmen, they are senators, they are governors. But if David Hogg doesn't like them, if David Hogg thinks they're too old, if David Hogg doesn't think they're radical enough, he is raising money to get an opponent to challenge them in a primary so that David Hogg can pick who the Democrat nominee should be. As you can well imagine, this is not resting well with the elder statesmen of the Democratic Party. But listen, this is what you get when you choose David Hogg as your vice chair. James Carville, who has forgotten more about winning elections than David Hogg will ever know. Has David Hogg ever won anything other than his own race for vice chair? James Carville had much to say about young Mr. Hogg and his strategy.
Somebody sued David Hogg. He's an officer of the Democratic National Committee. He is the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and he's running against other Democrats. I would like to know, and you went to law school, does he have a fiduciary duty toward Democrats? If you work for News Nation, you can't promote CNN. That's because you work for somebody else. You have a fiduciary duty to your employer, which anybody can understand. He's being paid to run against other Democrats. I think it's an outrage. I don't know if I have standing, but I might give the DNC $10 and sue him. He's a contemptible little twerp, if you ask me.
Sue his ass, Jim. I'll have you on the show to talk about it.
I might. I don't know if I have standing, but somebody can standing.
sue his punk ass. Start it right on this show.
Thank you, Newsbusters, for the clip. Yeah, he's a contemptible little jerk. Or did he call him a prick? I'm not sure. Let's follow up, though, because David Hogg is doing a whole media blitz now, which I'm sure is being paid for and managed by the Democratic National Committee so that he can defend himself and his plan to defeat Democrats that he doesn't like as the vice chair of the party. So he went on Jake Tapper on Friday and responded to James Carville.
So here's James Carville. Here's what he had to say about your idea. Take a listen.
The most insane thing I ever heard is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee is spending $20 million running against other Democrats. Are we supposed to run against Republicans?
What's your response?
What's his plan to deal with our 27% approval rating? That's my question to him. The fact of the matter is right now, our party is in a crisis. We are seeing people lose faith in our party. They're losing faith in democracy across the country. And we need to make sure that we're getting people to vote for Democrats, not simply because we're not Donald Trump, but because we have a better message, a better option for them. Not simply the less bad of two options, as I think Carville tries to promote when he says, well, we just shouldn't say anything. Carville believes in a politics of being timid, of hiding. I believe in fighting. And that is what people want to see right now from the Democratic Party. We just saw an example of that with Senator Van Hollen going to El Salvador to say, we need to meet with this man. And yes, Democrats obviously are in the minority right now, but let's be clear, we cannot win back the majority if we do not convince the American people that our party offers something that isn't just not Donald Trump, but is substantially better than Donald Trump, that fights to lower costs for Americans across the country, whether it's healthcare, housing, or the foundational building blocks of the American dream that feels so out of reach for people, or addressing gun violence. We can't simply just hide, as Carville repeatedly promotes, not to mention the fact that, frankly, he has not won an election since before I was born. I think it's time for some new voices in our party.
When were you born?
2000.
Well, I guess that. So anyway, I can hear James Carville's head exploding all the way from New Orleans when you called him timid. And James, you're welcome back on the show next week. And
happy to talk more.
And you can respond.
I do love that Tapper there admits that he's on a first name basis with Mr. Carville. Hey, James. Nauseating. So let me get this straight. David Hogg thinks that James Carville is the wrong person to lead the Democratic Party, which I know Carville's not interested in leading the party. He's just showing them what they're doing wrong. And he's pretty good at that. James Carville is not right. What the Democrats should focus on, how did he put that? Was, no, hold on. Let's just hear it again from his own way, because it's so precious. Let's hear it one more time.
To say we need to meet with this man. And yes, Democrats obviously are in the minority right now. But let's be clear, we cannot win back the majority if we do not convince the American people that our party offers something that isn't just not Donald Trump, but is substantially better than Donald Trump.
All right, so one quick thing. They actually don't have anything other than they're not Donald Trump. That's literally all they've been running on for the last 10 years, is to oppose Donald Trump. Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump Nazi, Trump fascist, Trump. That's all they're still doing, right? So he actually has a point there. They do need to they have to come up with something that they're for. But listen when he articulates what the Democrats should be running on. Hey, everybody, I've got a great idea. This is what the Democrats should have as their platform going forward. Why didn't you guys think of this before? Here, listen to David Hogg's bright idea.
That fights to lower costs for Americans across the country, whether it's healthcare, housing, or the foundational building blocks of the American dream that feels so out of reach for people, or addressing gun violence. We can't.
Healthcare, housing, and gun violence. Those are all real new ideas for the Democrats. Wait, isn't that pretty much all they ever talk about for the last 50 years? You've got ideas for housing? Oh, that's true. You know what? Bring in an expert. How about Gavin Newsom? How many billions of dollars of tax dollars from California is he put toward fixing the housing problem? And he has the most homeless people, the criminal vagrants in the entire country. Oh, and yes, definitely double down on gun violence, because Democrats never talk enough about gun violence. I love that this guy goes out there and he's really good at raising money. And he likes to talk about how we've got new ideas, and every single one of his ideas is the same old Democrat idea from frickin' Walter Mondale. But you go, David. He wasn't done, by the way. This may be my favorite David Hogg clip. He went from CNN, went over to CBS News, and sat with Major Garrett. And this was a long interview, and I didn't want to repel you with it. But listen to this little nugget here.
For them, because we go out there as Democrats all the time and say democracy is the most important thing. We have to defend democracy. We fail to acknowledge that this generation, democracy is what put us through school shooter drills and school shootings. It's what's put us through the climate crisis and so much more.
All right. This is the vice chair of the Democratic Party, basically trashing democracy. At least we're not falling into the trap of the fight over whether we are a democracy or not. We are not. We're a constitutional republic that utilizes democratic process to choose our representatives. There is an element of democracy in our country. That's how we choose our representatives. But ultimately, we are a constitutional republic. But he's trashing the notion that Democrats constantly talk about how we have to defend democracy, because democracy has led to so many bad things. He's the vice chair of the Democrats, and he's trashing democracy. Listen to it again.
For them, because we go out there as Democrats all the time and say democracy is the most important thing. We have to defend democracy. We fail to acknowledge that this generation, democracy is what put us through school shooter drills and school shootings. It's what's put us through the climate crisis and so much more.
Democracy ain't everything it's cracked up to be, man. I'm the vice chair of the Democrats. And democracy got us school shootings. Democracy got us the climate crisis. Yeah, maybe we need to rethink this whole democracy thing. Now donate to the Democrats. It's amazing. I mean, again, I can't get enough of David Hogg. All right. This guy, though, he's the minority leader for the Democrats. He's not having a good day. Whoo, man, is that a lighting problem or what? Or is he just ill? Hakeem Jeffries appears to be seasick on the set of This Week, and he doesn't seem too thrilled with the idea that his own party is taking money from Democrat donors to run against his members when he's in the minority. Because let me just understand, you may think, yeah, that's the way Republicans should do it too. Let me just explain something to you. if you've got members in the House of Representatives who are Democrats right now, and now they're going to face a primary challenge, it means they got to take money that they normally would have used in the general election, and they've got to use it to defend themselves against little David Hogg, which means they'll have less money in the general election. That's why that man looks like this right now. That's why he looks like he's got gas.
David Hogg, who I know you know, a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, he's going to be joining us on the roundtable, and he is pursuing this effort to unseat some Democrats in safe seats through primary challenges. He's talked about a culture of seniority politics that is not working for the party. He said, quote, "We need a better Democratic Party and need to get rid of the Democrats in safe seats who do not understand what is at stake now, who are asleep at the wheel, not meeting the moment, and are a liability now into the future of our party." What's your response to this idea of targeting some of your Democratic incumbents?
Well, I look forward to standing behind every single Democratic incumbent, from the most progressive to the most centrist and all points in between. They're working hard in their communities, rising to the occasion. This past week, we had, of course, a Medicaid Matters Day of Action, a Safe Social Security Day of Action, and we have to continue to do all of the things: rallies, town hall meetings in Democratic districts, town hall meetings in Republican districts, days of action, telephone town hall meetings, site visits, press conferences. We are in a more is more environment, and more is going to continue to be required of all of us. Now, the House is the institution that is known to be, was built to be the closest to the American people. That's why we have elections every 2 years. Primaries are a fact of life. But here's the thing. I'm going to really focus on trying to defeat Republican incumbents so we can take back control of the House of Representatives and begin the process of ending this national nightmare that's being visited upon us by far-right extremism.
They hate David Hogg. They are so pissed off at David Hogg. You know, that would have been a great opportunity for Hakeem Jeffries to say something nice about him. Say, listen, he's new at this. He's got some energy and some exciting ideas. I'm willing to work with him and talk with him. I also want to protect my, he didn't do any of that. He didn't, look at his face. How happy are you if you're Hakeem Jeffries? You're going to deal with the fact that you're in the minority, that you've got nothing against Trump. What do you say? Oh, we had a day of action to protect Medicare. No one cares. And now you got to look over to your left, and here comes David Hogg jumping in there, raising money. Understand something. Every single dollar that David Hogg raises for his PAC that's going to run against Democrats is a dollar that could have gone to Democrats to keep them in office. This is a beautiful thing to watch. And that's why that man looks like that right there. All right. So meanwhile, we wrap it up here with an extraordinary scene. Take a look at this panel. This is Donna Brazile over on the left side of your screen. The woman in white there. She used to be the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, right? All the way over on the other side is Reince Priebus. He used to be the chairman of the Republican National Committee. And then there's David Hogg in the middle. And so Jonathan Karl asked these two former chairs of their respective parties, and Donna Brazile has had no success, by the way. She was the chair of the Democratic National Committee when Hillary Clinton was running for president. We know how well that went. Reince Priebus, on the other hand, he actually saw quite a bit of success with the Republican Party, including the Trump win in 2016. So let's see what these two Washington, D.C. wise old men and women say about David Hogg while David Hogg's sitting there to his face.
They're losing trust in all of our institutions, the media, business, whole civil society. We're in a crisis. I don't know if we want to call it a constitutional crisis, but we're in as former President Biden was here, an inflection point. Look, I think what David is trying to do is to not just help to re-energize the party, but to help rebrand the Democratic Party. The concern that officers of the DNC right now, they have signed the neutrality pledge. David did not sign the neutrality pledge. So he's in hot water with Ken. I told him he threw a rock in the water, and him and the two of them and the officers, they got to get out of the hot water. But that's not my position right now. My position is many of these so-called safe blue seats, and I can get in trouble Many of them are seats that women and minorities finally had an opportunity to come and sit in because there were no seats at the table for us. So before you start wiping clean the menu and the plates and the seats, be very careful because many of those seats are in
as a
districts where we
former
are.
party chairman, Durance, how would you handle a vice chair who was going to primary?
Well, I'll answer and then I'll explain it. I mean, unfortunately, David, I'd have you removed from the party.
What a great moment. How would you handle this, right? I'd have him removed. Although, to be honest, I mean, for David Hogg's purposes and the people who support him, that's probably a badge of honor that the former Republican National Committee chair would have him removed. It's just a beautiful thing to behold. They're absolutely imploding. They were so sure that Kamala Harris was going to win. They were so sure that Donald Trump wasn't even going to make it to Election Day. They were so sure that they were going to keep him off the ballot. They were so sure that they were going to be able to get him in jail. They've been sure of so many things. The one thing that David Hogg said is true, though. They have no idea what they stand for, and they're not offering the American people, or Democrats for that matter, any sort of vision about what they're for. All they've been about for the last 10 years is what they're against. They think that's enough. Hillary Clinton thought it was enough. Kamala Harris thought it was enough. Joe Biden thought it was enough, and it's not. You got to be for something in this country. And all they know how to do is be against Donald Trump. And David Hogg actually isn't all that different. He's just younger, has more energy, and can work social media well, which is great. It's not good for the Democrats, but it's great for us. The bottom line is they're falling apart. They're imploding. And the media doesn't want to talk about that, right? It's chaos over tariffs, or it's chaos at the Pentagon, or it's chaos in the White House, or it's chaos. Meanwhile, literally right in their living room, they've got chaos in their party, and they barely want to talk about it at all. I don't know how this is going to end. I can just tell you we're enjoying the show. Pop the popcorn. We're ready for the second act. All right, that's it, guys, for our Monday show. Thank you so much for watching us today. Do we have any super chats to play with here, Kevin McMahon? We do. Ball State alum with a $10 super chat. Francis was a Jesuit. There's a reason why they're referred to as God's Marines. I didn't know they were referred to as God's Marines. Kevin, you are not as suspicious of Jesuits as I am. Is that true? God's Marines?
They were called that traditionally because they would be sent to all the four corners of the world to evangelize. I'm suspicious of some of the older ones, but not the younger ones. The younger ones are pretty great. The older ones I have some qualms with sometimes.
Yeah, see, the Jesuits that I had to deal with in school in my youth, they're fading out now. They are fading out. What did you think? Oh, and we got another $5 Ball State alum. Don't know if you caught it last week, Larry, but Jake Tapper worked as a spokesman for Hooters. He's a serious journalist. I didn't know that. Actually, he's gone up in my esteem a little bit, if that's true, if that's what he did. Thank you, Jeff, for those very fine super chats, a contribution to the conversation today. I didn't see that. Is that true? I'll have to look that up. Kevin, what did you do? Were you okay with my obituary for the pontiff?
Yeah, wonderful. It's not an easy thing to do.
It isn't, because you do disagree with it, but for all of the controversy and all of the problems and all of the confusion over this pontificate, the fact of the matter is we are exactly where we were when he first became Pope about 12 years ago, a little over 12 years ago. The doctrines haven't changed, the dogma hasn't changed, and there's actually a renewed energy of young traditional Catholics. We saw record-breaking numbers here in the States. And did you see that one stat about France and the number of new baptisms in France?
Yeah, I did. That would be glorious for the oldest. What do they call France? The older sister of the church.
Yes. It was that'd be fantastic. We need a renewal. We need some rejuvenation. All right. Anyway, that's all we've got, guys. Thank you for the super chats. Thanks for watching today. Nice big audience. Give us a subscribe if you're with us. We do this every day. Although, should I announce our situation for tomorrow, Kevin, or no?
Why not? Yeah, go for it.
All right. Tomorrow, the show's going to be a little different because we're going to be at the White House. We're going to be at the White House for special coverage of this week leading up to the 100-day anniversary of the Trump presidency. So that's good news and bad news. The good news is we're going to get a lot of cool content firsthand from 1600 Pennsylvania, not making any promises about who we're going to talk to. Anything can happen. But it also means we probably aren't going to go live tomorrow. So that's why you want to subscribe to our channel and get some alerts going. So as the daily news cycle rolls and we're able to get our content from the White House, we'll be able to deliver it right to you. So if you like our show, and I think you do, and you haven't subscribed yet, do it. Whether you're watching us, well, whatever platform you're watching us on, go ahead and give us that subscribe. So tomorrow from the White House, you'll be able to be up to speed on everything that we're giving you. All right. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you watching. We'll see you tomorrow, sort of, from 1600 Pennsylvania. My name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry.